Hello and welcome to Cindershadow Gaming. I'm your host, Cindershadow, and this is This Week in Magic. Well, this week has been filled with Timespiral Remastered spoilers and details of the set. And I'm not impressed. This reprint set is looking like a reprint set of the past called Chronicles, where they reprinted things into oblivion, and it really does start to feel that these mastered sets are the road that they never really wanted to travel down again. It was the reason why we had the birth of the core sets originally, where it would be half reprints and half not reprints and new cards in a standard style product, but instead it's gone to a modern style product where things are getting redone. This is strictly a reprint of Timespiral as the block, and it just seems that things are going off not it's not really that appealing. They've gone to artwork that is questionable because they've gone back to the old border frame. Now, on some cards, I do understand that you want the old border frame. It is nice to have those old border frames, especially on the artifacts where the term the brown deck or the artifact deck became part of it. And that was one of the things that used to be part of Tron with the old Urza lands and artifacts and everything else like that. So it's kind of niche that way, that it was fun and stuff like that. But everything else, the old card frame makes a lot of the newer art not stand out the way that it's supposed to. And it just really brings the set down. Now, let's take a closer look at that. So with Timespiral Remastered, they have what's called the bonus sheet. And it's this list of cards that are going to show up one in every pack. It's adding a certain level of value, but it not adding that value at the same time, because this sheet is track printed, and it's dependent on what gets slotted in there is very interesting. Now, does this mean that you could end up with 2 rares in a pack? Yes. 2 mythics in a pack, technically, but I think that they've done this track printing enough now that they will limit you to 1 mythic in a pack unless you get a back-to-back foil of a mythic. Now, I don't understand if these show up in foil versions on top of the bonus sheet. It's very strange, and that detail I have not seen yet if that's the case. Like, this whole bonus sheet shows up in its own slot, but does that mean that they can show up in foil as well on top of that bonus sheet? We don't know yet. We won't know until we see much more of the packaging and much more of the details. The bonus sheet is giving the old style to a lot of these cards. The white cards really bleeds out the text. Like, you have the white text on the top on a white card. It really makes it difficult to read some of these. The old blue cards are old frame style blue cards are interesting. These are what they're calling the time shifted ones. Certain things like Ponder looks good. But other than that, I'm not liking the old frame with the newer art. The newer art is done in a high resolution image, and adding that to a older frame that was never really meant to be in high resolution kind of loses the appeal for me, and it just loses a little bit in the artwork. I know the old cards like this that were in foil really did showcase the foil of the cards, and that's why, like, 7th edition foils are highly sought after, because it really did make the old frame pop. But other than the foiling process, there isn't much appeal to these old frames. It's cool to take newer cards and put them in the older frame, but at the same time, it was from a generation that they moved away from the older style because it bled out the cards. It didn't make the cards pop as much, especially when you have the Golden Fang here with the hybrid mana. It's not the same looking at on these older cards, or older framed cards. Newer cards on the older frame, man, it just takes this. They're trying to make this retroized version of these older frames. New again, but I think it kind of missed the mark here. These would have been cooler as like an expedition foil in that sense, just as an idea to throw it out there. Ancient Stirrings being reprinted in this slot. Now this means that these cards aren't in the normal packs, and you will only end up with these cards in the slot. So yes, they might increase the value a little bit, but I don't see that, because in a lot of cases these cards aren't going to be fully printed in that sense, like a normal print run. We've got commons all the way up to mythics in this bonus slot. So the mythics that are in this bonus slot will be very limited in that sense, to even a normal mythic. A normal mythic is printed at half the relevance of a rare, and now you take that half and do it again into this extra slot that will really be filled with a lot more jank than a lot more things that are worth it. And that's the dog knocking something over. Anyway, it's very interesting. Like, Chalice of the Void is very neat to see in the old style frame. Everflowing Chalice, Hedron Archive. So there's a few of these. Really, when it comes down to the artifacts, seeing them in the older frame, especially like Panharmonicarn, Solemn Cycloramtum, Sorcerer's Spyglass, a few of those will be highly sought after because of the older frame. And it'll be the artifacts more than the other cards, because they slot into pretty much any commander deck. The old school golden frame for legendary multicolored stuff, I really feel it loses the effect. Feathered the Redeem, like the card, it does not do the card justice. That artwork is lost in the gold frame. Same with like Dovin's Veto. I don't like the way that these cards look, and I really think it's going to lose a lot of appeal to these cards, and it'll be a niche market that'll pick up these cards, and ultimately I don't think the appeal is going to be that great. The Waste being reprinted in this bonus sheet, this is the only version of the art that they picked, which it would have been interesting to pick one of the other ones, but the full art version of this is way more sought after than this card will ever be. I do not like this in a non-full version card right now. It's very interesting that they went with Renkamp Ruins and Mystic Sanctuary, both those cards being banned at one point or another. The Ruins was banned in Standard. Mystic Sanctuary just getting the modern ban on it. The Ancient Den, another artifact land that's banned in pretty much anything that you play, which makes things very interesting for the pick that they did with these. Yeah, they picked some cards that are highly recognizable on this bonus sheet, but ultimately I think they've missed the mark with a lot of this. It is nice to see the slivers coming back now. They pick one sliver and put it into this bonus sheet. That's kind of strange that they did that, considering slivers are part of the main set. So it's interesting that one sliver made it to the bonus sheet. So maybe that one out of the slivers might be a little bit more valuable, but ultimately Chronicles was a horrible selling set. It was a set that was reprinted into Oblivion, and we're going to see the same thing for Timespiral unless they do a limited print run of this, but I don't think they are. I think they're going to be printing this at a standard level because they want people to draft with this. And that's the other reason why I think this set's not going to do very well, because they want people to draft with it, and people won't be able to draft with it because their stores are still not open to do this. Maybe by the end of the year, if they hold back a certain level of the stock and then re-release it for Christmas, it would have done great by that time, because we've got news on vaccines with the World event, and hopefully by the end of this year, I could be in a store playing a real game once again with things getting lifted. I am in Alberta, so they are a little bit more attentive to wanting to lift things for everyone. So with Timespiral coming out, they are adding more to Arena. We've got a list of cards that are being added to Arena in their Historic Anthology 4. It's interesting because we're not seeing some of these showing up in Timespiral, but they're adding these as an anthology. THRU and Inspector was a card that used to be in there, same with Declaration of Stone back in the days of the beta and the alpha. It's very interesting that they just don't release these as a Shadows over Innistrad set coming to Arena, and now they're picking and choosing certain cards to be released in there as this set. Now, Throbbin's Inspector, it's a common, it's easy enough to pick up and burn some common wildcards for that. Decoration in Stone won't ultimately do much when it comes down to it. It might be your one thing against Scoot Swarm or something, or Field of Dead decks in Historic, but even then, I believe Field of Dead is even banned. So ultimately, they're banning these things that are doing these mass tokens. So we'll see how things fall down. We got Iceberg corrects a crab, another mill crab with a snow mechanic. It's going to make mill in Historic very unplayable, and people won't want to do it. You got Martinley's Slumber, which is not surprising. They're really trying to mirror everything that Magic the Gathering offers in the paper game to Arena now, and they're really pushing that forward, saying this is only a sample of what we're doing, and they're trying to create this parity between the actual real world of Magic the Gathering to Arena, and they're trying to mirror that with newer cards. And that's why I believe we went to Keldheim and we see all the snow mechanics, because that was a thing of the past, and it was just something on the checklist to mark off, saying it is now an Arena, and this is something more that paper Magic does offer. Sword of Body and Mind, I'm not surprised that they're finally adding this, but they're not adding them all. And then we got Torment of Scarabs, which is interesting that this never came out in the Kaladesh block, but this is a very powerful card. And Curse, at the beginning of Enchanted player's upkeep, that player loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. You add this with Tigrid from Keldheim, and that's going to create something. So that is, I'm kind of excited to see Torment of Scarabs in here, just because it was adding something more. Now, if we could get the Torment of Hellfire re-added or Battle at the Bridge, that would be even better. Liz Anna Huntmaster, there's a more powerful version of a card like this that's only a 2-drop right now, so I don't suspect this is going to change much for Arena in Historic. Yeah, Elves is a big thing, but both of these, the Abomination of Llanowar, also it's toughness equal to the number of elves you control plus the number of elf cards in your graveyard. It's a dead card on arrival because there's too much already that is way better than this card, so I don't see it doing much. Cold Steel Heart, which is Snow Artifact, I'm not surprised to see this being added. And then we got a Blink Moth Nexus, so we're getting closer and closer. Inspiring Sanctuary, that was one of the cards I needed for the Thopter Paradise or Thopter Paradox deck. That's interesting to see that they've taken this out of the Kaladesh block and added it in separately. So that does give me hope that maybe in these historic anthologies that they will add other cards for that deck. That, to me, that's needed in that deck for it to actually run properly. So that's one step closer. There is a replacement for Battle at the Bridge, so I can probably rebuild my Thopter Paradox deck in Historic very soon if they keep adding cards like that. Harmless Offering, I'm happy to see that come into Arena. That's quite funny. We'll see what shenanigans can happen with that, but unfortunately you got to burn a rare wild card to get this outside of spending the gold or that. And now they're adding Death Shadow and Death Shadows in Arena. This is going to it's going to shake up some stuff, but you're going to get degenerate black decks that just mean that you go low on life, and now Death Shadows is going to be a thing out there. So we've got a whole list of cards there. It's interesting that they're finally adding some muchly needed cards for certain decks that I want to play, but it's at the same time interesting that I didn't see these in the Timespiral reprints. So we'll see what happens here going forward. This week actually came out to be something like the 25th anniversary of the reserved list for Magic the Gathering, so it's quite an interesting thing to see come out. This is something that's been a long time and stuff like that. And this is from March 4th, 1996. It's the card reprint policy from Magic the Gathering. So the introduction stands, Wizards of the Coast understands that many of you were surprised the quantity and selection of cards from the Arabian Night, the other expansion sets that we reprinted in 4th edition and Chronicles. We have therefore created the Magic the Gathering reprint policy to explain why we chose to reprint cards and how many cards from which expansion sets you can expect to see reprinted in future Magic products. So this was the birth of the reserve list, and it's quite interesting to see that this comes out, that Timespiral is coming out with this, because it really does look like the Chronicles set of the past to me. If you probably, most people weren't around for the birth of Magic and when Chronicles really came out, and it really, when you sat there and you looked at Chronicles, you went, I'm not buying this because there's nothing there that I can't get from other packs already, and it just plummeted the way the cards were, but it made them widely available, and that was the whole purpose of it. Now, these cards are already pretty much being widely disputed, but because of this was also part of why they came out with core sets and made it always half and half. And now they've gone back on that. So the reserve list will be something that I think will be abolished at some point in Magic's future. So we'll have to wait to see. Magic the Gathering has tremendous appeal both as a game and collectible. However, Wizards of the Coast is a game company, and we believe that Magic is first and foremost a supreme game of strategy and skill, even though we're getting coin flips right now. So this is going to throw in the face of their current fire design for Magic the Gathering. This is kind of taking things of this and just throwing it to the side. We choose to reprint certain cards from limited expansion sets in products like 4th edition and Chronicles because we believe the cards we reprint make for enjoyable game that Magic players deserve an opportunity to play with these cards. So the whole purpose of reprints originally was to make them more available. Wizards of the Coast understands that Magic also appeals to many of you as a collector. For this reason, it has always been our policy to print any card with the new card power in black border before or at the same time as printed in the white border. This was the birth of the white border cards. Why they made them white border was to indicate that it was a reprint, but they did abolish that a while back just because white border cards were seen as a stigma, much the same that they're seeing that silver bordered cards are a stigma on Magic the Gathering cards, and people just don't have the appeal for them. And it's really unfortunate to really take it that view, a white bordered, silver bordered. If you want to play with the cards, you play with the cards, plain and simple. It's like the collector's edition of the alpha set that was out there. It's seen as a lower version, and people were trying to mirror them as alpha cards or beta cards, but then by covering up the backs with an alpha version of a cheaper Magic card just to try and upsell them. And it's really unfortunate that things like that went that way because it did ruin more cards in the long run. For this reason, yada yada yada. It also been our policy to never to reprint in black border a previously published Magic card using identical art and card power. Yeah, whatever. We know that's different now. We discovered, however, that in addition to a limited nature of our black bordered products, much the collectability of Magic card is determined by the availability for gameplay purposes. Accordingly, we have decided to expand on our previous policies by creating a new category of cards called the reserved cards that we will never be printed again in black or white border in-game functionality identical form, meaning they won't rename the card as something that's identical as something else that's on this list. As mentioned above, reserved cards are cards that will never print again in black or white border in-game functionality identical form. For this purpose, a card is game functionally identical if it has the same card power and casting cost as another card. Note that the inclusion of any particular card from the reserve list does not indicate that we have any plans to reprint that card. The current list of reserved cards includes all cards from Alpha Beta editions that do not appear in 4th edition or Ice Age, all uncommon rares in Arabian Nights and Antiquities. Oh wow, I can't even say that today. That have not yet been reprinted as white bordered. That does not appear on the reserved 3rd edition, 4th edition, or Chronicles. 3rd edition being unlimited. All cards from Legends and the Dark that have not been reprinted as white border accompanying this, yada yada yada. Reprinted cards from Fallen Empires and subsequent products in order to create products that are enjoyable for Magic players. Wizards of the Coast may reprint cards from Fallen Empires, Ice Age, Homelands, and from limited expansion sets, as well as other cards from Chronicles in order to maintain collectability of these products. However, Wizards of the Coast will reprint in white border no more than 25% of the rarest cards from Chronicles, Fallen Empires, or other limited expansion sets. At least 75% of the rarest cards from each of these will never be reprinted in either black or white border. For purpose, the rarest cards from the given expansion set are all of those cards that appear within the lowest frequency on the rarest press sheet used to print that expansion, yada yada yada. It's all technical jargon. This was their release of this, and it's cool to go back and really look at this nowadays and kind of make the comparisons to the Fire design that they're doing now, how they're trying to make these more powerful cards and not functioning the same. But it's very unfortunate that they're kind of blurring these lines a little bit more nowadays. In conjunction with the release of each new edition of the basic game, such as 5th edition, we will announce which sets were considered eligible to have cards from the rotated into the basic game. Any rare card from those sets not rotated into the basic game, oh god, so many, will become reserve cards and thus be printed and never be printed again in black or white border in-game functionality identical form. Non-English language editions, note the foreign policies applied to both to English language and non-English language cards. Yeah, that's nothing too unknown. Now, they give you the list here as well on the next page, which, the reserve list, I believe, did grow since this. So it is the original list to see it is kind of cool. In addition, no Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, and the Dark expansions will not be printed in black or white bordered form in any additional language, although cards from these expansion sets may be printed in additional languages in black border, white border form as part of a non-language editions of the basic game or Chronicles, Fallen Empires, and subsequent limited expansion sets. Wizards of the Coast will periodically announce when any of these products are being removed from consideration for reprinting in additional languages. Special purpose reprints. All of the policies described herein apply to standard tournament legal Magic cards of standard size and bearing the standard Magic card back. Wizards of the Coast has printed and may continue to print non-standard versions of cards for sale or promotional use, such as factory sets and oversized cards. So this is meaning that they're just that they can still use them for like the oversized Black Lotus that we do see, or if they wanted to change the backing of it and print it as like a newer collector edition set, or maybe as a secret layer, this is showing that it can be promotionally made. And you've got a large list here, Ancestral Recall right at the top, all the way down to Wormwood Tree Folk. Well, and this is going from limited edition to the dark. There was stuff from like Urza Saga back that was added to this eventually. Now we're getting into the thing where the reserve list doesn't really exist in that sense, and certain things are kind of getting added to this list more in the artist way, with the way things are happening in Wizards of the Coast and today's day and age of the culture shift that we're seeing in Magic the Gathering and everything in geek culture. It's very unfortunate to see that things are getting added that way, but we'll have to wait to see how this continues, and hopefully Wizards of the Coast still does retain the reserve list, because at some point, if this does go away and they just sit there and print them all, it's going to be unfortunate in that sense. So it is really, because of Timespiral, we're taking a walk back, looking at everything going on. And like I said, Timespiral to me is looking like the Chronicle set that we've had of the past. They're reprinting cards over and over again. Tamagotchi is in the set, and that card has been reprinted to death right now. So are we going to see these cards possibly end up on a reserve list soon enough? Because they're not going through standard anymore. They don't reprint them in standard. They're reprinting them in these modern sets, which it's killing the modern game. All intents and purposes. You don't have many choices where to play modern right now or where to play these other games, and Commander is really becoming king at that. And when you only need a single version of these cards, it's really driving the price down, which is great for a player if you want to enter the game. With the prices being driven to the floor right now, you're going to be able to pick up Magic very easily. Now, there's this balance there. Unfortunately, if you don't have a little bit of a sense of balance and value with these cards, which we've seen in the past, if there's no value behind the cards that you're playing with, there's not going to be a continuation of these cards being traded or anything like that. It is a collectible game after all, and because it's collectible, people do want to trade and actually do want to create sets. And now we're getting so many more products out there, it's very difficult. But talking about the amount of stuff that has been printed and stuff like that, something recently came up from Peter Atkinson. He was someone that worked with Magic and Wizards of the Coast back during the alpha days. And this was a post I believe he made on Facebook that I'm going to read out to you guys. And it is talking about the original print runs of alpha and beta and how many possible Black Lotuses are out there. And I thought it was quite interesting, and I thought it was something that was worth sharing with everyone here, everyone that does watch this video, as it is. Once again, we've taken a time through the past. We've looked at the reserve list because it's come up to its 25 year, and Timespiral stuff is really an ode to the past of these cards. So I think this is worth looking at. So here's a throwback for you. I'm going to talk about Magic the Gathering print runs from 1993. For quite some time, Magic players, essentially collectors, have wondered what the official print run sizes were for various Magic sets, especially Alpha and Beta. During my time at Wizards of the Coast, we never disclosed this sort of information, although we hinted at it. At one time, we said there was a combined alpha and beta print runs that were around 10 million cards. That's total cards that were ever printed between the two sets of alpha and beta. Remember, beta is a complete reprint of the alpha set. But around 10 million isn't very precise and does say anything, and it doesn't say anything about the relative quantities. Recently had a meeting with Daniel J. Chang about selling off some cards. After nearly 30 years, I am finally able to let go. Plus, with Gen Con where it is right now, I could use some extra cash flow. In the course of our dinner, I learned that Travis King has done some significant research into the topic, and estimates on the quantities are considered the best out there. My reaction was, people are still trying to figure this out. I just emailed Luke and he probably knows for sure. Meeting Luke Martins, who was our sales executive at Cardamonde throughout the 90s. In many ways, Luke is the unsung hero of Magic history, performing the Herculean role of printing Magic cards for Wizards of the Coast, working with us and Cardamonde through the staggering growth process, and at the same time dealing with people at Wizards of the Coast who didn't know what the F they were doing, especially me. This is back in 93 that he's talking about, when they didn't even know what they were doing. They didn't even know that they had this $1 million project on their hands, which, yeah. And we continue. We didn't even know how to write a proper purchase order in 93, much less create production specs for parameters like cardstock, corner radii, and so on. So I emailed Luke and compared notes with Peter D. Werdint. I don't even know how pronounce that, Weerdt, who was taken over Luke's responsibility since Luke's retirements. After digging through some archives, they found the following numbers on alpha and beta print runs from 93. I believe that it is as official as the numbers are going to get, also matches with the own memory, and remarkably close to Travis's research. The alpha print runs for Magic the Gathering was 26,000 60-card starter decks and 70,000 15-card boosters, which would equate to 2.61 million cards. The beta print run for Magic was 78,000 60-card starter decks and 210,000 15-card boosters at a total of 7.83 million cards. Adding alpha and beta together, we get 10.44 million cards for the limited edition of Magic. My memory was around 10 million, so this jives well. Doing some fun math, this means there is approximately 1,008 alpha Black Lotuses printed. Travis estimates 1,100. This is scary close. Well done, Travis. So this post really shows you that there's just over 1,000 Black Lotuses out there on the market from alpha. That is something noteworthy and why the price of the alpha Black Lotus is so high. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this week. I hope this trip down memory lane and Timespiral Remastered does you some good. If you liked what you saw here, do leave a like and subscribe, and we will see you all next time.